Okay, it's up to you.
Okay, I will start. Good evening, everybody. I'm so happy to see all of you. I know we'll have more people joining. My name is Betty Santangelo. I'm a member of the board of National Organization of Italian American Women, NOIA, and I'm also chair of the programs committee. So it's one of the reasons I'm very involved with the Long Island group. So nice to see a number of people from different parts of the different regions. So tonight we're very privileged to have from a well-known author herself, Anastasia or Stacy Rubis. She's written the novel Oriana, the story of Oriana Fallaci, a leading Italian and world journalist. I don't know how many of you knew about Oriana Fallaci before tonight or before the announcement of this presentation. I had not heard of her really until I heard Alessandra or Stacy Rubis speak at the Columbus Citizens Club at least several months ago. I'm trying to think if it was.
It was in the summer. It was last July.
Okay. And I was just so impressed with her. And I was there with Carolina Capone, who's also on here with me. I so impressed that I said we have to get her to come back and teach people about Oriana, because Stacy's a great speaker, but the story is just so interesting. I'm going to leave most of this discussion about Oriana and who she is to Stacy, because she's got a lot to tell you. But I want to tell you a little bit about Stacy. She has her BA magna cum laude from Brown and master's from, look at my little notes just disappeared. It's wonderful, wonderful technology. Master's from Monmouth, right?
Montclair State.
Montclair, sorry, see, that's what happens. You can't. In any event, she's published in many places. She resides in New Jersey with her family, including her daughter. But she also travels a lot to Greece, which explains why she's so able to capture the spirit of Greece in her book. She's received a number of awards, but okay, there's Francesca. Hello, Francesca. Anyway, so I'm going to turn it over to Stacy. She has some slides from time to time, but all right, now we have to focus back on Stacy now, Elena, can we?
Well, if Stacy speaks,
I will just talk.
Will be, yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. All right. So Stacy, I'm turning over, and then then we'll be opening it up to questions with Carolina, and I have both read the book and had want to have some discussions, and we really welcome all your questions tonight. So thank you, Stacy.
Yes. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Betty, for organizing this, and Pat Tinto for putting me in touch with the wonderful NOIA group. I want to talk to you about Oriana, and mostly I'd love to have a discussion and, open it up to questions as soon as we can, so that, we all have fun talking about her. But one thing I'll admit right away is I'm not Italian. I'm Greek American. My parents are immigrants from Greece. But I found this story so compelling because I love Italians. I grew up with Italian best friends living next door. I traveled to Italy many times, spent my honeymoon there. My husband and I took Italian lessons, and he studied architecture there. So, I consider myself maybe close. But also, the Mediterranean connection is so very strong that in discovering a woman like Oriana, I felt I knew, women like her in Greece as well. There's Pat Tinto waiting to enter. Okay, so I'm not Italian, but this is an Italian-Greek love story. As much as it's the story of Oriana Fallaci, trailblazing female journalist, she paved the way for people like Barbara Walters that we all know, and Christiane Amanpour. Everybody knows who she is. She's a CNN anchor. She specializes in international news. And Christiane considers Oriana her role model. She has said that I wanted to be Oriana. So she's basically modeled her career on Oriana Fallaci. So this book is a novel, but it's the story of Oriana and how she rose from her humble beginnings in Florence to become, in the 1970s, she was known as the best reporter in the world. Yes, she's Italy's most famous journalist, hands down. But in the 70s, she was the world's best journalist. And she was called a legend by Dick Cavett, who had her on his show, his talk show. And she was also called the greatest interviewer of her day by Newsweek. All right. So it's the story of her career. How did she do this from these poor beginnings in Italy? But it's also a love story. It's also her personal life. So it's the life and loves of Oriana Fallaci. And I will tell you that, she had to give up some things in order to become a pioneering journalist.
I'm going to interrupt for a second. Can you please put your phones on mute because there's some background noise that's coming in. Okay. Sorry, Stacey.
That's okay. So can I just see a show of hands who had heard of Oriana Fallaci before this event?
How do we do a show of hands on
One,
this?
two, I can see everybody.
Okay, you can?
Elena's
Good.
from Italy, Maria, 1, 2, 3, 4, about 5 people out of, I'm not sure, 15 or so.
18.
As I said, in Italy and frankly in Europe and in Latin America, she's a household name. People know her. But in America, where she lived for decades, she lived in Manhattan, she owned her own townhouse, we have forgotten her. And in fact, ladies, it was super hard for me to publish this book with a, traditional publisher. I didn't self-publish. Why was it hard? Because all of the big publishers said, oh, we like the story and we like your writing, but nobody knows her. Or, oh, it's so good, what a topic, but we wish you were American. So I have to tell you that I struggled and struggled to get this story in print for about 11 years. And, it's with I'm spreading the word, I do a lot of promotion because it's only with people's support that we can get these Italian stories out there into, the American public. So Oriana is born in 1929. She's one of 3 girls. She's the eldest. Her father is a woodworker, kind of carpenter. Her mom is a stay-at-home mom in Florence. She very quickly loves to read, but World War II comes along and Florence is occupied by Nazis. And so her childhood is basically, taken away from her. And her father is part of the resistance, the partisans in Florence. So he uses her to carry secret messages in Florence on her bicycle. She's only 14 or so. And she's carrying secret messages wrapped in her braids. Once she literally had to carry a grenade in her bicycle basket. And this is past German checkpoints. The Germans controlled the city. They had checkpoints everywhere. They had guns, of course. And she helped her father resist the Nazis and the fascists, Mussolini's fascists. As soon as the war was over, she went back to school, got excellent grades, and she wanted to go to university. This was unusual for a girl. Her mother, though, was a very important character in her life because she encouraged Oriana to have work, to not be, she said, don't be a servant like me, work, fly. So her mother gave her this hunger and this impetus to go out in the world and have a profession. So when it was time for university, her parents, she said, I want to be a writer. And her parents were like, no, no, no. How are you going to support yourself? You can't make any money being a writer. And her mother said, you should be a doctor, like all mothers and fathers. So she went to university planning to be a psychiatrist. But after a few months in her first year, her father was in a terrible car accident, and they didn't have any income any longer. They already had very little income because of the war and the depression. So what does Oriana do as a responsible, smart girl that she is? She quits university and she goes to work to support her family. And because she had always wanted to be a writer, she goes to a newspaper. She lies about her age. She's only 16, and she gets her first job. And from there, she basically climbs her way up, okay, without taking no for an answer, without, at the time, girls weren't, first of all, they didn't work in newspapers except as secretaries. And second of all, if they worked at newspapers, they covered society or fashion. Nobody did like serious stories, okay, on politics or war or anything like that. So she works her way up to the point where she goes to cover the moon shots in 1969. And, that was a subject that nobody thought girls could cover. It was too technical, too scientific, And then she got herself to Vietnam as Italy's only female journalist. And she went there 7 times, putting her life in danger. She embedded with the American troops. She flew in helicopters and she went on bombing missions. And she basically put herself in harm's way. And after that, she was able to, her articles sold so well. Basically, they were published in Italian in the newspaper, the weekly newspaper, L'Europeo. That's what it was called. But her work was translated into English and then sold internationally. So her work would appear in Newsweek or New York Times Magazine or a New Republic or any international publication. So that's kind of how her reputation grew. And I forgot to mention that early in her career, before she did all the serious stuff, the world leader interviews, she went to Hollywood and she interviewed actors and actresses on their careers, their art form, how they broke into the movies, how they memorized lines, that kind of thing. And she became friends with Ingrid Bergman. She became friends with Sean Connery. So this was a woman who really just, she was a bulldozer. She pulled herself up by the bootstraps. She never let fear stop her. She said she had fear, but she never let it stop her. And she got to the point where she was interviewing heads of state, world leaders, going to the White House, to interview Henry Kissinger. And that was when she reached the peak of her fame. That was the 1970s when, as I said, Dick Cavett had her on his show and called her a legend in, the news business. And Newsweek called her the greatest interviewer of her day.
Now, Stacey, I'm going to stop you for a second. Why do you think that so few of us know about her? I mean, I know people from Italy do, but she was such a legend. And she was in so many different places. How is it that we don't know about, like I do know about Christian Amanpour.
I know. I think a couple of things. One, I hate to say, is because she's Italian and not American. Okay. Just like the editors told me when I was writing my book, ooh, great character, but we wish she were not foreign. Yeah. Second thing I think is that we tend in America to pay more attention to what's on TV than what's in print. And Oriana was a print journalist. She wrote for her newspaper, L'Europeo, for decades. She was translated into other publications, but she was never a reporter on TV. And the last reason I think is that we just have short attention spans, darn it. You know, in the 70s, people knew her more, especially around the New York area. She was a New York figure. She was elegant. She was fashionable. She was cool, you know. She always wore the latest fashions. She was very outspoken. She dined at, you know, Mama Leone's and Le Bernardin and, you know, all those places. She was friends with Ingrid Bergman, for God's sake.
How did you find her? How did you find
How
her?
did I find her? That's a great question. So how did I, little, you know, Miss Greek American, find Oriana? I was lucky. I was in Greece in 1983 approximately, and I was on a Greek island with nothing to read. So I went into a souvenir shop that had a few books in English. If anybody has traveled to Europe or Italy, you know that in the 1980s, there weren't many books in English, you know, so, and they were expensive. So I found this paperback, one book in English called A Man. And I bought it and I started reading it on my way back to Athens on this ferry boat, you know, in the heat of the sun. And I was like mesmerized by her writing. Oriana's writing is something you should experience for yourself by reading her books. Carolina, you said you read A Man. She's so passionate. She's so emotional. She's so honest in her writing that it just like grabs you by the throat, you know. It's not boring. Let me put it that way. So I read her book and it fascinated me because it was by a female journalist who was so bold and so outspoken, but also because it was a dramatic and romantic love story. And I love love stories. Anybody else out there who likes a love story?
We're all
woven
Italian.
into
We're
their
all
book?
Italian.
You're all Italian. Okay, everybody loves a love story. So A Man is Oriana's memoir, basically, about her love affair, the great love of her life, who was Alexander Panagoulis, and he was Greek. So that right away cemented my interest. And basically, Oriana was in her mid 40s, had a bunch of bad love affairs. You know, she was really taken up by her work. You know, as a woman, she had to devote herself fully to her work in order to advance. And she didn't, you know, have much time for dating. And the affairs she did have just never worked out. She was hurt quite a lot. So in her mid 40s, she went to Greece to interview Alexander Panagoulis. Why? Because he was an activist and a hero, and he had tried to topple Greece's dictatorship. Greece had a dictator, just like Mussolini, but Greece had the dictator in the 60s and 70s. So this guy, Alexander, had, you know, tried to act against the dictator, and he was caught, thrown in jail along with a lot of other innocent people just because they had long hair or they went to the wrong meeting or they had the wrong friends or read the wrong newspaper. So this guy Alexander went to prison for 5 years where he was tortured and almost killed. So when he was released, Oriana viewed him as a hero. She admired these kinds of people who would fight against unfairness, authoritarianism, inequality. So she went to Greece, went to his house. His mother lived there too. And she proceeded to interview him in his mother's bedroom. He was sitting on the bed and she was sitting in a chair, and they fell in love right over the interview. And of course, as a journalist, she wasn't supposed to do that, but she was always a rule breaker, and they fell in love. He was 10 years younger than she was. And he didn't have a job. He was just out of prison, and she was at the peak of her profession and her fame. So she was this like big deal journalist, and he was this like younger, kind of little bit lost idealist and activist. But he lived in Greece, she lived in Italy, but love cannot be stopped. So he followed her to Italy, where she lived. She lived in Florence, and she had a beautiful country house in Tuscany. Does everybody know Greve in Chianti? And it's a small village near there called Casole. So she, she had a lot of money at this point, and she bought, big, beautiful farmhouse where even her parents lived, in true Mediterranean style. And so she and Alexandra lived there, and they lived in Florence for 3 years together. And I'm not going to tell you what happened, so I don't spoil it, but she considered him, the great love of her life. And she spent 2 years writing a book about him, and that book is A Man. That's how I got introduced to both of them.
Thank you. That's a
Any other questions? Carolina, do you want to jump in with anything? Yeah.
Yes. I want to circle back to Betty's question first about why Oriana wasn't recognized and known.
Okay.
And I just had a thought because I think people know Gloria Steinem. They still
Yes.
remember her.
That's true. She's
Um,
still alive. Let's
She's
not
still
forget.
alive.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
And looks great, I think, in her
Yeah.
80s, whatever. But I think there
90.
was
She might be
great
90.
misogyny in those years.
Yes, of course.
And that was really her biggest struggle, Oriana's
Yes.
biggest struggle.
Totally.
And that in the US, there was more of an open mind because I think of Gloria Steinem and other important feminists at that time. So I think that's the reason why people.
I think that's really true. Obviously, there was heavy sexism in Italy at the time. I mean, she was born in 1929. That would make her almost 100.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
That would make her 96. So lots of misogyny in Italy. In fact, the men journalists would say that she slept her way to the top. I hate to tell you, they called her Oriana Fellatio. Yeah.
pretty fun.
Yes, they did.
Yeah.
And they were jealous. They were jealous of
They
her.
were jealous. They were very jealous. Yeah.
She made much more money. She was Italy's most famous journalist, not most famous female journalist, most famous journalist. So absolutely, they were constantly competing with her and trying to, tear her down. Yeah, that's absolutely true.
I think it's interesting for people who haven't read the book to talk about some of the people she did interview you, because
I'm going to tell you right now. So as I said, in the 50s and 60s, she went to Hollywood and she interviewed all these celebrities, and her interviews have been collected in a book called The Egotists. And it's used. All of her books right now are out of print except one, and I'll tell you which one later. But here are some of so after Hollywood and after the moon landings and after Vietnam, then she was able to interview world leaders, just like the guys did. And she just became the greatest interviewer. Why? Because she would ask the tough questions, the embarrassing questions, the provocative questions, the probing questions, the ones that everybody was asking behind the people's back, but nobody was brave enough to ask them to their faces. Okay, so here's a list of some of the people that she interviewed. All right. Robert Kennedy, Dalai Lama, Henry Kissinger, Golda Meir, Yasser Arafat, Muammar Gaddafi, the Shah of Iran, Indira Gandhi. And now here's some other types of celebs, figures. Walter Cronkite, Sean Connery, Ingrid Bergman, Dean Martin, Federico Fellini, Sammy Davis Jr., Shirley MacLaine, Alfred Hitchcock, Paul Newman, Jane Fonda, Walt Disney, Neil Armstrong, Dr. Spock. I mean, anybody who was anybody at the time, in the especially 60s and 70s, she interviewed. It became like prestigious to sit down with Oriana Fallaci. That's how big she got. And here are some of the things that, you know, she had the guts to say to people. So two of her most famous interviews, the first one is Henry Kissinger. And it was at the height of the Vietnam War, where already most Americans were against the war by this point. It was in 1973. And they were wondering why all these young men were being killed, for what reason. And Kissinger kept saying, the war will be over soon. The war will be over. It will end. It will end. And so when she interviewed him, she said, you know, are you embarrassed, Dr. Kissinger, that you keep saying the war will end, but it hasn't? And, you know, he very defensively said, no, I'm not embarrassed. We have decided it will end, and it will. And then she said, don't you find, Dr. Kissinger, that it's been a useless war? And he said, on that, we can agree. So that made world headlines, because here was Henry Kissinger, who was National Security Advisor to Nixon. He later became Secretary of State. But here he was admitting that this has been a useless war. So that made headlines around the world. To Muammar Gaddafi, you remember him, the dictator of Libya. She said, I haven't told you that you are a dictator yet, but I will now. You know, so right to his face, there are armed guards, you know, his henchmen are all around with like rifles and stuff, but she doesn't care. She just is so courageous that she will, you know, stand up to them. To the Ayatollah Khomeini, this was another super famous interview that I'll tell you about. Does everybody remember Khomeini? He was super conservative religious leader of Iran. He came in the early 70s after the Shah of Iran, who was pretty westernized, who wore Western clothing and let women wear whatever they want. But with the, it was called, I think, the Islamic Revolution, the Khomeini came in and he went back to, you know, women must cover themselves, you know, from head to toe. And, you know, homosexuals must be stoned. And, you know, the whole super oppressive regime, and killing a lot of innocent people. So when Oriana went to interview him, first of all, she waited 10 days in the holy city of Qom for him to sit down with her. He had agreed. That's why she flew over there. But then he kept putting her off. He kept saying, today, not his people, you know, oh, today he will see you. Oh, no, not today, tomorrow. 10 days go by. She has to hire a translator, and the translator tells her, you have to be married in order to sit in a room with men. So she married her translator. It's just a piece of paper that you get in like a city hall, but she did it. Her translator told her, oh, no, you cannot go with just this scarf around your shoulders and a kerchief on your head. You must wear a chador from head to toe. So he lent her his wife's. Oriana put that on. And she finally got the interview, goes into this room with, you know, only a carpet on the floor. They're all sitting on the floor. Her translator, Khomeini, his son, and a couple of guards. And she starts asking him the tough questions about some innocent people that he's had killed. And there was, for instance, a couple that was caught for adultery. And the woman was stoned, but the man got off with just like a warning, you know? And then she kind of let him have it. She was like, I forget what the term is that she called him, maybe probably Your Holiness. Why do you make women wear this chador from head to toe? It's very hard to walk, she said, and very hard to do anything like scratch your nose, okay? So he said, And this was along with the other oppression of women, no education, no driving, all that stuff. So he said to her, you don't like the chador, you don't have to wear it. It's only for young and respectable women. So that was an insult to her, and the young and the respectable. So, because, and she said, am I not respectable because I wear pants, when I'm in my home country, that kind of thing. So she said, oh, I don't have to wear it. Well, thank you, Your Holiness. And she proceeded to just take it off right there and then. And she had her own clothes on underneath, of course, but he was upset and scandalized, and he jumped up and left the room. So Oriana would not leave. She had waited 10 days for this interview. She had only gotten like half an hour with him. And she told his son said, you must go now, you must go. And she's like, I'm not going unless you get him back here for the rest of the interview. She sat there for like 2 hours. At one point they were going to lift her out, and she said, well, I'm going to have that all over the newspapers if you touch a woman and you do that. So basically the son got his father Khomeini to agree to come back the next day, with one caveat, that she would not ask about the chador. Okay. So yes, Miss Falaci, he will come back, but you must not ask about the chador. And Oriana's like, yeah, okay, I won't ask about the chador. So she comes back the next day. She's not wearing the chador. Now she's wearing only her mother's kerchief on her head and her own shawl around her shoulders, black. And what is her first question? What do you think?
How do I look?
Her first question is, Your Holiness, about the chador. So she went right into it again. She would not be cowed. She would not be intimidated. In fact, she said, I'm not intimidated by anybody. And I think an interesting question about Oriana is, how did she get like this? This is what powered me through 11 years of researching and writing and publishing this novel. I was so fascinated by her character. She gave me courage. Reading about brave women, makes you more brave. Oh, she did that? Women can say that. She was so assertive, so bold, that it thrilled me. And I was always trying to figure out how did she get like this? How do you think, given what I've told you thus far, how do you think she became that way?
Well, I don't know if anybody else wants to
Take a
add
wild
something.
guess. Linda. Unmute. We can't hear you.
Linda James.
Yeah, I'm here.
There you go.
Maybe it was her upbringing. Maybe her parents brought her up to be extremely independent.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's what-
Anybody else want to add to that?
I'll say something.
Yes, please.
She might have even just got rejected a lot, which made her stronger and stronger and stronger. And, you know,
Absolutely. When people are telling you no, and she doesn't take no for an answer. Yes.
exactly.
I
Karen,
would
did you
add-
have your hand up?
It was her mom.
Yeah. It was a lot her mom. Anybody else?
Yes, I wanted to add that probably those bicycle missions carrying those messages
Yes.
Yeah.
would have had a
Yes.
lot to do with her strength.
Absolutely. So in the book, I say something like, a childhood of fear burned off her fear. She was in fear most of her childhood, and she just got used to it and got used to dealing with it. And all that was the war and the Nazi soldiers and the German checkpoints and all that. So it was totally the war. Her father, okay. Let me tell you a story about her father. Once there were bombs falling on Florence from the Allies, yes, from the Americans, but they swore, not to bomb the museums and the art of Florence. And for the most part, they didn't, but they were, the shelling, trying to get the Germans out. So the Falaci family and everybody else used to hear the sirens and then go hide in the church, right? Or in a bomb shelter. So this time they were hiding in a church, and Oriana and everybody else around her was crying. And her father slapped her and said, girls don't cry. So that'll toughen you up. The other part for me is, as Joanna said, I think, her mother. Her mother was, you had to be tough in those days in Italy. You probably all have, you know, ancestors that were tough. They had to live and they didn't have enough food and they had to live through wars. So her mother was tough as well. But her mother was also giving her permission and encouraging and pushing her to be in the world, to compete on the world stage, you know, not to stay home and be a housewife. So yes, I think from both her parents and also the time period that she grew up in, having to, you know, deal with wartime Florence, you know, everything was bombed out. Is anybody here familiar with Florence and what happened during World War II? So the Germans lost and they were retreating and they proceeded to bomb every single bridge in Florence, except one, which today is called Ponte Vecchio. Yeah. So the city was in
Anastasia,
rubbles. Yes.
do you know why the Ponte Vecchio wasn't bombed?
I don't.
It's because the German general
Yes.
was in charge of
Yes.
the occupation in Firenze,
Yes.
studied in Firenze.
What did he do?
He studied there as a student,
Oh, he studied there.
and
Thank God.
thank God, and he
Yeah.
wanted to save
He
the
had
Ponte
respect.
Vecchio. Isn't
Yeah,
that
he had
amazing?
respect. Thank goodness.
Yeah, I don't know where I read that, but
Yeah. Yeah. So that's you know,
America.
that's where she got her courage. There's so many other things about her. I told you a little bit about her glamour. This was a woman who, when she went to Vietnam, wore like Gucci loafers. You know what I mean? She was always in the latest fashion. She's from Florence. That's the home of Gucci. That's Ferragamo. That's, you know, later on Prada and all those things. So is anyone familiar with the phrase la bella figura? Yeah. So, you know, she's from
It's
Florence.
a book. It's also the name of a cute
Oh,
book.
really?
Yeah, La Bella Figura is the
So
name
it
of the book.
means like that you have a responsibility to cut like a fashionable figure in public. Okay. You don't go out in your sweats, you know? So she grew up, you know, with that. Even if they had no money, they were put together. And the other thing that really, okay, so, oh, this is funny. In her Vietnam like journals, she even had like her hair appointments when she would get back to Italy. Her nails were always done, the jewelry, her hair was blow dried. She was always in fashion. When you see, I'll show you some pictures soon, and you'll see like when she starts out, she's like in suits, you know, like women's suits, like skirt and, you know, jacket. And by the end, she's in pantsuits. You remember the pantsuit of the 70s, everybody. And, you know, she's in jeans and like a graphic t-shirt, like whatever was the style. When she's on Dick Cavett, and I would love afterwards, if Betty, if we can do this, if I can have people's email, and I'll send you a clip from the Dick Cavett show that's on YouTube. But you'll see it's the 70s, it's the height of her fame, and she comes out in a turtleneck with a long necklace in one of those hip hugger belts, you know. It's always smoking. Did I mention the always smoking?
Yeah.
That's why we put smoke and an
Ah.
ashtray and a typewriter.
She and Ingrid Bergman, right? The two of them.
Yeah,
Right.
they had a lot in common.
You
know?
did.
Yeah, they had a lot in
Interesting
common.
relationship. Interesting relationship.
Yeah, so that's part of my book. I really wanted her in there. But the other thing that really attracted me to this story, and that I, you know, was just insistent on getting it out, was that Oriana really has a poignant life. she is brash and bold and, succeeds in her professional life, but she's kind of beaten up in her personal life. She really suffers pain, and she has regrets at the end of her life. And, they're all in the novel. You'll see what I mean. But, somebody asked me, what do I want people to take away, after they finish reading the book? And one of the things I would say, of course, is inspiration and courage about, just being a trailblazing woman, of course. But the other thing is that, there are trade-offs in life, and we don't always get everything. And Oriana is an example of that. Like and especially when she was born, maybe our daughters have it better. And I see a young girl on our screen. Hello.
Yes, yeah.
Hi. Maybe our daughters have it better, not completely better, because I will tell you that young women who read this novel cannot believe how they can relate to it still.
I think the story about feminism in this is incredible. I
Yeah,
mean, she is such a I mean, her, as you said, the competing things that she wanted in life. I can't have this if I want a career.
Yeah.
That's for even young girls. It's the same issue. Can you have both? Can you have children?
Still the same issue.
Yeah.
I think, the whole issue of work-life balance, the whole issue of sexism at work, unfortunately, we still face this. But Oriana, she never called herself a feminist, interestingly. She just lived a feminist life. What does feminist mean? It means equal rights for men and women. She just saw herself like equal to men. Frankly, she saw herself superior to men. So yeah. So that was another reason I wanted to write about her, because her story still resonates. I find it very poignant that you can be such a, like a star in your professional life, and yet your personal life is a little painful. Any questions so far?
Yes, I would love to ask, why did you choose to do it as a novel as
Okay.
opposed to nonfiction? I'm a professor of journalism in Washington, D.C., so this
Okay.
the journalism angle is near and dear to my heart. So thank you
Yes.
very much.
Oh, yeah. So, okay. So many reasons. One of them is I personally love anything based on a true story. I'll watch anything on TV. I'll read anything. And then I like to do my own research and kind of delve into Google and see what was true, what was false. Like, it gets me interested in the topic. Biographies can be a little dry. Also, with fiction and a novel, you know what I can do that a biographer cannot do? I can make up dialogue. What did Oriana say to her boyfriend, Alexander, when they fell in love? Nobody was there to tell us, right? I can tell you about her emotions. We don't know what her emotions were when she went to the White House to interview Henry Kissinger. But I can imagine that she was nervous, that she hid it, that she got really pissed off when he turned his back on her to keep answering the phone. Do you know what he did, Henry Kissinger? He got up in the middle of their meeting and he went, Nixon was calling him, and he left the room and he never came back. And so she's like wandering around this office and the wing, of the White House, being like, where is he? And then an aide came and told her he had left on Air Force One with the president. He just left. He didn't say goodbye. So I can imagine as a fiction writer that pissed her off, So those are a lot of the reasons. Also, I'm just a creative writer. That's like where I like to live. I will tell you that there are 2 biographies of Oriana. One was written, I'm sorry about my phone. It's like all the way over there and I can't answer it. So a guy named Darico, something like that. He's a scholar. He's Italian American. He wrote what was supposed to be her authorized biography. She met with him. He taped their conversations. And then Oriana decided, true to character, no, I will be in control of my story. And she told him he couldn't do it. But guess what? He did it anyway because he had put in so much work, so much time. So he did publish his book. I don't love it. He has this thesis as an academic that he kind of keeps proposing and putting forth, and I don't agree with his thesis, so I'm not a big fan of that book. There's another one that was written in Italian about 7 years ago, and it was translated into English by a woman whose name I cannot remember right now, Christina something, and it's pretty good, but it's cursory. Like it covers her whole life, and it's cursory. I wanted to focus on her career. How did she make it? And her love affair with what she said was the great love of her life. So I wanted to kind of focus in on that. Does that answer your question, Wendy?
Yes, very
Yeah.
much so. Thank you.
In the back of the book, I have author's notes. I've tried to stick to the historical record. I've changed very few things, but like one of the things I changed, it just doesn't really affect the story. Oriana had two younger sisters. They really weren't germane to the story, to her story. So I left them out of the novel. He had another brother and a younger brother. I leave out the younger brother. The older brother is important to the story, but not the younger brother. So stuff like that. But I tell you in the author's note, what I changed. I really tried though to try to stay close to the truth. Other people, I think Caroline. Is it Carolina? Yeah, Carolina.
I have a question.
Carolina.
Oriana, as we learn, is this incredibly strong woman, incredibly successful, persuasive, driven woman. And she meets Alejos, and he has his own agenda,
Yeah, his mission.
his
They
mission,
both have missions. Yeah.
and he's nothing like the Italian men that she was always very attracted to. Not elegant,
Right.
not that well educated, not, like a Florentine. And she puts a lot of energy into his life, and she gives up a lot of her life at the height of her career.
Mhm.
I don't want to give away the story,
Mhm.
but in the end, do you think that her relationship with him really was a benefit or a distraction that led to her decline and maybe her bad health because she really
No,
puts
the health has nothing to do with it. I mean, I won't say what happened, but what happened between them and ended in like 1976, and her bad health didn't happen until the 90s, like 20 years later. So,
but I mean, was it a benefit to her, or where would her destiny have taken her had she not met him? I mean, how did it really?
okay, here's my opinion. And this is a great book club question because that's very deep and everybody can have their own opinion, and there's no right answer. And speaking of book clubs, if anybody is in a book club, I have done Zoom book clubs. If you want to invite me to your book club, etc. Okay, so a couple of things. First of all, I think that for the first time, she was with a man who loved her as much as she loved him. Okay. Yes, they were both on missions. Yes, he was on a mission. No, he wasn't going to become Mr. Stay-at-home dad. But you know what? She wasn't going to become Miss Stay-at-home mom either. I think that he gave her the courage to start writing novels. It was always her dream to be a novelist. She loved the literature. So I think he gave her the push and the encouragement to do that, so that after they're not together anymore, not going to say what happens, her newspaper is falling apart anyway. They're starting to put naked girls on the cover. Everything's kind of going downhill, and she quits. Her boss that she loves is pushed out, so she quits, and she turns to writing books. And the first book that she writes is a man, so it's about him. So I think like he really was her gateway into doing what she always wanted. And, you know, she called him her great love. I'm going to take her at her word. Is love always magnificent and wonderful for us and totally beneficial? Probably not, you know, and not in their case, I would say, because they're both very extraordinary human beings. They're willing to die for what they believe. They're not setting up house.
Then, did you want to show some of your pictures, or you want to
I
just
do. Let's show pictures.
Okay, let me get to the folder.
Elena will pull them up and I'll just
Yes.
like narrate what you're seeing. Okay.
Just 1 second. Just 1 second.
Yeah, yeah.
Share the screen.
I just have another comment.
Please.
You know, going back to what you said, why we don't know her.
Uh-huh.
You know, her name Oriana.
Yeah.
It's not a familiar name in the United States.
True. It's not
particularly
easy.
in the 70s.
Yeah, that's true.
And I know when I got married, I worked for a Southern company and they said, what kind of name is Esposita? They couldn't pronounce it. So when you think about Oriana, that was kind of like not what the Americans were comfortable with.
That's true. Like, I'm willing to bet that Sophia Loren's last name is not Loren. It's too short.
It's right. It is short, right?
You know? Yeah, I think you're right. Again, it's the foreignness. You know, it's the, oh, what's her name? Is it Felici or Felucci or yes. Okay, can everybody see? Wonderful. Elena, thank you. This is great.
Awesome.
So this is Oriana on the right on her bicycle in Florence. Look at on the right of the handlebar. I think that's a little Nazi flag. You see that? Like she probably had to have that on her bike. And on the left is, she was beautiful. I don't know if I mentioned that. And she was petite, by the way. This dynamo was like, you know, barely 5 feet tall, very thin. So that's her on the left. You know, early on, I would say she's here probably in her 40s here. At her typewriter, always used a typewriter, no computer. And I think she typed like with 2 fingers. Let's see the next pictures.
Yeah, I'm trying to. Okay.
There we go. So that's her on the left, probably younger than in the previous photo. You see the hair? This must be 50s. The pearls, the black dress. And on the right, she's absolutely stunning. And that's in Florence.
Yeah.
Has everybody been to Florence? That's the Arno River. That's one of the bridges. I have no idea which. Okay, next. On the left, here we see some of Oriana's attitude. She's, you know, kind of tough. I think that here she's kind of probably imitating what the men did, which is put their feet on the desk. I personally love this picture. I love all the pictures she has behind her. And just the mood, the attitude that comes off. On the right is another picture of her, probably in the 1950s.
Let me interrupt for a second. Are other people going in and out, or is it just me? That
What do you mean by in and out?
in other words, I hear you talking for, and then I lose you. So it's fine if
Oh.
it's just me. I just want to make sure other people can hear you. That's all.
Okay. All right, just a second. I'm going to pick up this phone and hang it up. 1 sec.
I don't know if other people had the same issue. I just started.
Okay, I'm back. Yeah, we can
Okay.
go to the next pictures.
Vietnam.
Okay. On the left, Oriana is in Vietnam. You can see her pigtails. You can see cameras slung around her shoulders. One is a camera and the other is a tape recorder. So, you know, and she's running like hell. So there's something dangerous going on. We see people behind her with automatic weapons. And on the right, she's in her uniform. It's an American uniform. She embedded with American troops. You know, she got permission from Americans to go. We can go to the next. She went, this is Vietnam again. In the left, she's lying down. And you can see her loafers that she's wearing. The reason she was issued those combat boots, but they were too big for her tiny feet. So she wore her own loafers. On the right, she's got her camouflage helmet on. You can see a Jeep in the background and her ever-present cigarette. She went to Vietnam, I think I told you 7 times, starting at the end of the 60s, back and forth reporting. Her reporting on Vietnam is called some of the best on the war by American journalists. Okay, next. All right, here we have our love, Alexander. So in the top left and the middle, we have the day they met. This is the interview when she went to Greece to interview him. I think you can kind of already tell in the top left picture, the way they're both smiling, that there's some chemistry. They're in his mother's bedroom. He's sitting on the bed. That's a little table. That's her tape recorder under her elbow. That's her giant man's watch that she's wearing. And in the right-hand corner, we have her house in Tuscany. They are staying in Casole, in her, giant country house. The same in the left-hand corner, and that's her mom in the middle. Everybody see her mom?
Here.
Yep. And then in the right is her and Alexander again. All right. So these are pictures of Oriana in action. Often she had a photographer with her, and that's where I imagine these photographs come from. On the left, if you can believe it, she has embedded with Palestinian guerrillas. And do you see that she has like papers? Like it looks like she's writing notes, and they have guns. On the right, she is interviewing Muammar Gaddafi in the desert. So there's a fire in the background, and there's a tent pole that you can see. And she's hand holding, the tape recorders got smaller and smaller throughout her career. At first, it was like a suitcase that she had to carry. And now here in this picture, you could see how it's getting smaller. So Muammar Gaddafi, the dictator of Libya, she thought he was certifiably mentally ill. She thought he was just off in Never Neverland, the way he spoke, what he believed, and that kind of thing. And all of these interviews with all these figures can be read today in a book that's still in print from Rizzoli called Interview with History and Conversations with Power. Let's go to the next. One of my favorite pictures in the upper left-hand corner, she's interviewing Golda Meir. Everybody remember the Prime Minister of Israel?
Oh, yes.
She was always criticized for being ugly. Okay. That's what, her critics, they had to comment on her appearance. And Oriana went to interview her. She loved her. She wrote a beautiful introduction to the interview, and that's collected in Interview with History, her book. But she basically said that, this woman was amazing. Her housekeeper had left for the day, and, she made her own coffee and served them. And she reminded Oriana of her own mother, the way she dressed, the way she walked. And the other thing is that Golda Meir, for the very first time, spoke publicly about the heartbreak of her life, which was the end of her marriage. She was divorced at this time. She had married a man that she loved from the age of 15, but it didn't work out because Golda wanted a public life. and wanted to be in politics, and her husband did not. He wanted a private life, and he wanted, you know, them to be more at home, kind of in a, you know, more private, insular way, and they had to go their separate ways. And so Oriana, in the interview, reports on that, about, you know, she asks Golda, did you ever try to make it work? And Golda's like, of course, you know, but sometimes, you know, love is not enough. And Oriana remembered those words for the rest of her life. In the bottom left-hand corner, she's interviewing, anybody recognize him?
Alfred Hitchcock.
Who?
Alfred Hitchcock.
Yes, it's Alfred Hitchcock. He's he looks like a giant next to her. He is a large man and she's small, but he's also sitting on a chair that's a little higher than her. This took place in the 50s in a hotel room at Cannes, the Cannes Film Festival. She got an interview with him and she didn't like him very much. She loved his movies. He was a hero for her until she did this interview. And she said that she basically asked him, does it bother you that some of your movies have inspired real life murders? Because apparently they did. You know, some of his, I don't know what to call them, horror movies, were copied. Some of the murders were copied. And she asked him if it bothered him. And he said, no, I consider it flattery. And then he said some really obnoxious things about actors and actresses. He said something like he doesn't like actresses when they get pregnant, and that actors are like little children. So she kind of left the interview with a much more negative view of him than she started. On the right, you'll see her, like this is her in motion. There's the giant tape recorder. So I'm going to say this is probably early 70s, possibly late 60s. And, you know, there's her briefcase that she's picking up, and there's another bag slung over her shoulder, but this is her, you know, doing her job. Here we are. Okay. The middle picture is Manelli Tower. Anybody know where that is?
No.
It's in Florence. It's on top of the Ponte Vecchio Bridge. So it was probably in the old days a lookout tower, you know, for pirates or whatever. During World War II, it became resistance headquarters. This was very important to Oriana. This was where her father and the partisans met to, you know, conduct their secret missions and their resistance against the Nazis and fascists. This is a big part of the book. It's where she rides her bicycle to deliver the grenade. In later years, I mean, believe it or not, I think this is a hotel today. In later years, on the bottom was an ice cream shop, but in the old days, it was very important to her as part of the resistance. The other pictures are Oriana at her country house. I love the picture on the right. You can see her in a window. She's wearing a red shirt.
Just 1 second, because
This is the house in Casole that she bought and installed, you know, her parents and later Alexander and even later her sisters, you know, it was her house, but of course her whole family was invited.
What happened to her house? Did her house get sold?
She had it until fairly recently. Her heir is a nephew, her sister's son, but I believe they do not own this house anymore.
Okay. Sorry.
And that's quite all right. On the left, you can see Oriana working in her office in the country house in Tuscany. And, you know, this is the real her. She's got her hair tied up. She's probably not wearing any makeup. She's concentrating. She's at that manual typewriter. And she's all focus. And do we have any more?
no. Oh, okay. Oh, yes, yes.
We do. So this is the older Oriana. This is on the left. There she is in her beloved city of New York. She loved New York and she loved America. She considered herself, she said, New York is my lover, but Florence is my mother. And that's how she saw it. You know, she was born in Florence, but she fell in love with the city of New York. Here it looks like she's at the River Cafe, because that looks like the Brooklyn Bridge with a view of the World Trade Center on the left. And on the right, she's signing books. As I told you, you know, she published a man. She published a book called Inshallah. She published collections of her interviews. She published a famous book called Letter to a Child Never Born. That was a big book in the 70s. It was about the abortion debate. And on the bottom right, that's Oriana in her later years as well.
And that's it.
She was in New York on 9/11.
Yeah.
She was in New York on 9/11. She was in her 70s. She was ill with cancer. She was in her beautiful townhouse on East 61st Street. And the first thing she wanted to do was go down and cover the disaster. She called the policeman and said, how do I get a permit to go down there? And he's like, you can't. And so she basically wrote what was happening for the main paper back in Italy, Corriere della Sera. And she kind of covered 9/11 from here. Are there any questions?
Yeah, we don't want to abuse your time because we know we're just supposed
Yeah.
to go anywhere, but if there are people who have questions,
I don't see anything in the chat. I mean, just
Hi, I have
Okay.
a question. I'm sorry,
Oh.
my camera's not on. I'm traveling by car.
Okay, we
My
have
name's
Leanne
Leanne.
and then Mary.
Thank you.
So my question is, do you have any journals, like with your research, do you have any letters, journals of hers? Like, had you collect
Fantastic
like some of these
question.
things?
Thank you for reminding me. So the best part of my research was that, of course, I had to go to Florence. I really suffered there eating, you know, pasta and gelato. No, it was great. Rome, I knew, but I went back there. But the best part of researching is that her archives, her original manuscripts, letters, interview cassettes with her interviews of world figures are all in Boston University.
really,
Yes, and I went there, and it's anyone can go there. You make an appointment, they bring you, tell them what you want to see or hear, they bring you boxes, and then, you know, like I put on earphones, and then I was hearing like Oriana interviewing Walter Cronkite. It was phenomenal. You hear her voice. Oriana always said that you could tell a lot about a person from their voice. She was a connoisseur of the voice. And I felt that I could tell a lot about her from her voice. And so, Leanne, that's where they have a lot of her letters, photographs, not everything. You know, there's a lot back in Italy, but there's plenty at Boston University. So that was super fun. In later years, as I wrote this book, things started appearing on the internet. When I started, there was no internet. So things started appearing on the internet. And you can see a fantastic interview on Charlie Rose. He interviewed her like 3 times, and a great interview on Dick Cavett. And I can send you those links. I also want to mention just today that by accident, I saw that Oriana in hardcover on Amazon is only $12 suddenly.
yes.
I mean,
You
people
don't
have paid-
realize it, but Ellen has been posting it for everybody.
Oh, thank you. People have been paying $30. I'm so glad that the price has come down. It's also Kindle is $12 and the paperback is out, and that's like 17. So
And we have the connection to I Am, which gives a discount as
yeah, I know, and
people should
that's
be good.
great. And I went and spoke there, but yeah.
So why don't we just take 2 more questions and then maybe
yeah, we have
Okay.
a last
Mary
question.
had a question.
Well,
Yeah.
I just, you kind of answered it already because I wondered, how did you get her voice for your book?
Oh, that's a great question.
But
No, that's a great question. Basically, I studied her and studied her, but if you see the videos that I will send you, you will also get her voice. It's very distinct. She has a lot of attitude. a lot of kind of arrogance, you know. She's a Florentine, so, you know, she says herself that, you know, she's a daughter of the Renaissance, you know, she has that Italian, you know,
Bravura.
yes, yeah, bravura, right. And so I just studied her and studied her, and it took me so long to write and publish that, you know, yeah, I was living with her. She was like my best friend for 11 years. So anybody else? One more question?
Yeah, Leanne Spitalieri is asking how long did the research last? So you were talking.
Well, you know, my fascination with her lasted 40 years. I discovered her 40 years ago. Okay. But I would say my serious study of her, I would say a dozen years from start of the book to finish of the book. And I would say 5 or 6 years of that was like researching and writing, researching and rewriting.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, but that was fun. You know, researching is super fun when you have a wonderful character like Oriana. I was never bored. Even today, if I see something new about her, like on the internet, boom, I have to read it.
Well, I think all of us who read the book can tell you it's really very well written, and we thank you so much
Thank
for your
you.
time. It was really very, very interesting, enlightening. I think we probably could go on for another hour, but I don't think that's fair to you. And I know people have made
Thank you.
different
I
plans.
really appreciate it. Like I said, if anybody has a book club, and I'd really appreciate any reviews posted to Amazon. That always counts for people. It's one of the annoying jobs that authors have. I think I told you this is my first novel. So I wrote it when, you know, it got published when I was 63. I'm 65. And thank
What are
you.
you writing now? That's the question. What are
I'm
you
writing
now?
another novel, another historical novel. It'll be
Okay.
based on Jackie Kennedy, Ari Onassis, their children, and the years on the private island of Scorpios.
Oh,
when
interesting.
those two got married.
I like hear the dialogue.
Yeah, well, it's hard. I'm in the middle of difficulty right now.
Yeah. Okay.
It's yeah, writing a book is not, it's not an easy thing, but I don't
Well,
recommend it, but reading is much more fun.
It was wonderful hearing you. I having heard you once before, it was just like listening to a whole new story explanation.
Thank you,
So thank
Betty.
you.
Thank you
Really.
so much. And you know, the Columbus Citizens Foundation is also online. It's on YouTube. So if anybody
Oh,
wants
that interview. Okay.
to see it, yeah.
All right. But you're going to, why don't you email whatever the YouTube thing to Elena? And
I
she'll
will.
forward it to everybody.
I will. And I just want to say that, you know, you're all Italian women. We all need to be proud of this woman and to, you know, spread the word about her. She should not be forgotten. And all of our stories, they need publicity. Otherwise, they will all be lost. And
So-
people will be like, no Italian woman ever did anything.
Maybe we should ask the professor who was on the phone if she's still
Yes.
on. Are you planning to discuss Oriana in your class? If you're
Listen,
still-
I'm a longtime fan of Oriana Fallaci. One of the reasons I was also inspired to go into journalism. So
Oh,
we'll be teaching a media history course in the fall. I'm wondering if that's something you might be interested in, especially from the perspective of teaching students how to interview by someone who's not well known in
yes.
this country, by a journalist for this generation. And I also have a book club, so I'm happy to chat up this in that way. So the best way to get in touch with you is through your website, if I wanted to make that request, or
Elena, can we post to my email?
Yeah, sure.
It's easy. STACY
that would be fabulous. Thank you. Very
RUBIS
helpful.
100. STACY RUBIS 100 at Gmail. I'd love to hear from anybody who reads the book. And if you have any questions, just get in touch with me. And Wendy, I'd like to discuss with you, because I talked to somebody at BU where they have her archives, for God's sake. And he teaches history of journalism. And he said, we don't do enough with Oriana Fallaci.
I agree 100%.
They had no interest in anything I had to say. It's a shame. It really is. It's a crime. I'll go that far.
I referred to her in a speech when I was honored by this wonderful organization, Noya, in Washington, D.C., with a Wise Woman Award. And I quoted the Chador episode
Oh,
in my
wow.
speech. So I loved hearing it again from you. So
that's
this,
great.
this just means a lot. So
She's
thank
I'm glad you got to, I'm glad you participated. Thank you for
very
joining.
glad,
Yes.
very glad. Thank
Yes.
you so much. Thank you, all of you, for taking time out of your busy lives to be here. It was a pleasure.
Well, thank you, Stacy. We really appreciate your time. And good luck on the sales of the book. Everybody should buy it.
Thank you. Thank you. Be
All right.
well.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you,
Bye.
Noya.